I wanted to rewatch it right away. It was incredible. And Dream replies, "That's your advice?" I'm obsessed with dreams. And for the past few weeks, I couldn't stop thinking of The Sandman. I just finished watching season 2, and here is my review both of season 1 and season 2. Since I talked about The Sandman in several other videos, I will link them up here so that you can check out the plot summary and some spoiler-free thoughts in case you're not yet convinced if it's worth your time, given that this series was cancelled. One of the 2 videos in which I talked about The Sandman was all about dreams, and this tells you that I truly think about dreams all the time, but I'm also curious about the supernatural. I love to see it in movies and TV shows. In the case of The Sandman, I'm not familiar with the source material, and as soon as I got into season 1, I didn't know what to expect, who the Endless were, what it meant for Dream to have a family, and so on, which were all interesting elements for me. So let's start from the very beginning. Season 1. The opening sequence was a great introduction to the character, and I was hooked right away. Besides, it took them about half an hour before showing us the face of Dream. In this first season, each episode is almost self-contained. There's a main plot line, but I reckon the style and the storytelling of each episode are distinct. And hands down, my favorite episode in season 1 was the one with death, and we will get into it in a bit. But who is Dream? Who is the main character? I loved the fact that he is called with many names: Morpheus, Oniromancer, Sandman, King of Dreams, Shaper, Dreamlord, Dream of the Endless, and the Prince of Stories. He struggles to forgive, to forget, and constantly reminds us that he is not human, and especially at the beginning that mankind is none of his concern. Pretty early on, we are also introduced to his tools, and I kept thinking that, well, I hate sand. If I can choose a beach with or without sand, so with rocks instead, I would go for the rocks. And I was trying to picture how it would be for them to film with actual sand. I mean, I guess it was all CGI, or almost all CGI, but I was still wondering, you know, there are some movies in which they use some props and they ended up having those props all over the place at all times. I couldn't get rid of them. So I thought having sand so present in the show must have been a nightmare, if they used any at all. Even the hairstyle that they chose for Dream, mainly in season 1, was spot on. You know, it reminded me of the Rasmus. His whole attire was magnetic, but the main feature was the incredible acting with his eyes. When I first saw the actor, Tom Sturridge, he wasn't really the most appealing character because I first saw him in Far From the Madding Crowd, and it even took me a while to realize that it was the same actor, because I had watched Far From the Madding Crowd a long time before watching The Sandman, and then I rewatched it recently, and there I was, oh my gosh, this is The Sandman, it's the same guy, and yet I thought the acting was completely different. I thought he was really good in this show. Since the first few episodes, we learn that even dreams have rules, and this made everything more compelling. It would have been so much easier for them to create a series in which the endless possibilities of a dream world could have fixed all problems and lowered the stakes. I absolutely loved Lucienne as well. She was the best support character, but also who wouldn't want to have such a librarian as a consultant? And staying in the dreaming, I couldn't care less for Cain and Abel. I'm not sure if they had a more crucial role in the source material, but I didn't like them, and they were a kind of comedic support type of character, just like the Raven, Matthew. But the lines that Matthew said were more suited for such a character. I thought he wasn't as exaggerated, or he didn't make any effort. He didn't have to try as much to be funny. And he wasn't too present either, so you wouldn't get tired of his responses or the contrast with the character of Dream. In episode 4, I honestly thought that Rosemary would die at the end of the car ride. And John was so unnerving. Perfect acting, of course. The challenge in hell between Morpheus and Lucifer was totally unexpected for me and way more thrilling than I thought it would be. It certainly didn't involve the type of fighting I was expecting, and that made me happy, honestly. But the entire confrontation and dialogue with Lucifer was impeccable.
But to say dreams have no power in hell. Tell me, Lucifer Morningstar, what power would hell have if those here imprisoned were not able to dream of heaven?
Even though I felt like I was missing something, once again, since I haven't read the books, maybe there was some other previous confrontation or something else related to dream or the dreaming and hell. I don't know. Oh, and the helm was so creepy. It made me uncomfortable every single time Dream put it on. And another creepy element or character was the Corinthian. He was so perfectly eerie that I couldn't look at him when he wasn't wearing glasses. Episode 5 was the one that I couldn't easily watch in its entirety. And this is also something I mentioned in the previous videos without any spoilers, but I was lost when I first saw this episode because I was perplexed by how they were developing that episode, and after watching that I realized that they really focused on having quite distinct episodes in the first season because it kept going and it ended up being a horror, but I felt like they took the horror slasher side to a whole other level, which was definitely too much for me. But I know that a lot of people praise this episode specifically and said that it was the best of the show, but I seriously struggled with it. And at the end, it seemed as if we had reached the peak of the season, nearly the ending. And that's why I think I felt as if the pace was a little off throughout both seasons, I think, because some parts felt more disconnected than others, as if we've been told one story, and then another story, and then a shorter story, or something like that, all in, I don't know, 10, 12 episodes, you know? As if they originally meant for some of these storylines to be in a different season, or completely separate, just like they did with that special episode. In episode 6, which is my favorite from season 1, called The Sound of Her Wings, I loved that they addressed this feeling of we're done and now what happens? Because right at the beginning of the episode, Dream feels lost and devoid of meaning, a mission, a purpose. I thought it was beautiful seeing Death letting a man recite the Shema before passing.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one.
In a way, I wish it was just like that. A friendly lady taking my hand at the end, with a smile, with kindness. Death was probably my second favorite character after Dream in the entire series. If I could choose, I would live in the realm of dreams. I built so many worlds in my dreams, in my nightmares too. Over time, I added details, cities, neighborhoods to my worlds. Lots of scary things too, but at least there's no money in my dreams. No one is forced to do crappy jobs in exchange for money. That will not allow them to survive either way. Since I rewatched season 1 2 times this month, I realized that I completely missed most of the references to characters or events that will be addressed in season 2 and maybe seemed marginal in season 1. For example, in episode 6, the reference to the prodigal brother, but also the fairies and other references. And in episode 5, Rose was video calling one of the main characters in that episode, And this detail is something I completely missed the first time around. I enjoyed the second half of episode 6 too, which was the bet between Dream and Death. Dream barely gave any detail or had a proper conversation with Hob, and yet they kept meeting every 100 years. So I loved their friendship, but I kept thinking that living for centuries with zero dental care must have been a nightmare. Imagine the pain, and you're not even allowed to die. When they meet the last time in this episode, we see Dream properly smiling, I believe for the first time in the season, and that was heartwarming. And this is what I mean by I loved his acting, because he did his best to conceal emotions, and that's probably why I was able to notice even more whenever he had a spontaneous reaction to some conversations or to a person appearing in the scene. And there were just a couple of episodes, I think, towards the end of season 2, in which he was a little bit more relaxed, or you could see more range of emotions on his face. But I deeply appreciated the subtle reactions and expressions. I felt like the episodes from 7 to 10 were not as distinct as the others, except maybe the serial killer conference, also called the serial conference. That could have been a supernatural episode instead, because it was perfect for that if you watched Supernatural. If you missed it, I talked about it in the Supernatural shows recommendation video along with the Sandman, and this seemed, I don't know, made by the same person who made Supernatural or something. It really felt connected to it. The first time I watched the bonus episode, I was a little confused because, once again, if you don't have the background information, you really don't know what to expect or which are the characters that are gonna be added or why. But it looks more relevant now, knowing what happens in season 2. And now let's talk about season 2. And in the first episode, we see the Endless Gathering. And I wondered, why do they care so much about the attire? Was that meaningful in the source material? Side note, I don't like when Dream has long hair, but that's probably just me. And I also wondered, why did they change the look of Despair so much compared to the one scene in which we saw her in season 1? Was that just a creative choice, or has this anything to do with a subplot that we will never see in the show? If that's the case, tell me, but without spoilers, because I plan on listening to the books. And this is when the character of Delirium is introduced, and at first she didn't convince me. Once again, it could be because of the source material and I don't know something, but I don't really know why is there a Delirium character. What's the meaning behind, well, overall, what's the meaning behind the choice of these specific elements? Why Delirium? Why Despair? Why Desire? And so on, which I will find out when I get to the source material, I guess. And I chose to avoid all videos explaining this material because I wasn't sure how much they would explore in the series, so I didn't want to spoil the series for myself. So at the end of this month I will be able to check those out. So maybe some of these questions will make zero sense at that point. But I was just as confused as Dream was when Destiny explained why he summoned them. And as you can see, in this first episode I was wondering a lot of things, such as, do they eat for pleasure or sometimes they need it? Because when Dream was weak after being imprisoned, Lucien suggested he should eat something and rest. So I don't know if it's just some added energy or something. Episode 2, The Ruler of Hell, was my favorite of season 2 part 1, even though at the beginning I was confused when Lucifer finally showed his intention and tricked Dream. I thought it was a weak plot point, or maybe just weaker than others. And once again, am I missing some context? Why must Dream cut Lucifer's wings? But most importantly, why did Dream take the key? He could have refused, right? But in this scene, apart from my silly questions, I was so amazed by the cinematography, but I enjoyed the Sandman's production throughout both seasons. I thought it was gorgeous. I loved every single time Dream and Death met, but after this episode with Lucifer, when he has the key to hell, at some point he turns and says,
Someone who gives excellent advice. Ordinarily.
And I thought that was such a beautiful shot. And the same goes with the shot of him at the top of the stairs right before the banquet begins and as the guests arrive. This is when we meet the fairies, but we learn more about them in the next episode. And I do love some magic, especially the moment they got back to our plane in the flashback sequence. But also in that scene I loved the music, pure and simple whimsy, which is all I ask from fantasy sometimes, and nowadays it's so difficult to get. In this episode, the one thing I hated was Puck, couldn't stand him, but the other fairies and the odd way in which they behave, that was fine, that was nice to learn about. And even before this line was highlighted, right after saying it for the first time, I took note of this. When Morpheus is talking to Oberon during the play.
Things need not have happened to be true. Tales and dreams are the shadow truths that will endure when mere facts are dust and ashes and forgot.
And I love that. In some ways, this is also a reference to what happens towards the end of the season about forgetting those who pass away. In this episode, I was also surprised by how Desire always manages to manipulate Dream, his stubbornness and his interests. Episode 5, but also episode 6 were the least appealing to me, even though these are fundamental for the rest of the series. But I didn't care much for the whole family plotline, not as much the siblings, but Dream's family. I don't know if I simply didn't like Orpheus, or maybe we weren't given enough time before the wedding and before he goes on this quest and so on, and that's why I couldn't care less about him or his fate. To be completely honest, I thought he was dumb and excessive, and this, being excessive, might be something that you can expect from the gods. And as I said in the other video, when I was talking about chaos, which reminds me of the Sandman, I said that actually the Greek gods are not exactly my main interest when it comes to a TV show or a movie. I mean, I watch it, but it's not the main thing that attracts me. But in this case, I thought that if you recently watched Severance, you might have appreciated the reference. This is not as obvious if you just watched Severance without devouring all the deep dives on YouTube, as I did instead. And there was one specifically about mythology. If I find it, I will link it below. I can relate to Dream when he was talking to Distraction, who said that he left out of love of humankind, and then goes on saying, love is the only good reason to do anything. And Dream replies, that's your advice? That's exactly what I thought. But also I thought Death gives better advice overall. And I kept thinking, why did Dream need to kill Orpheus? Couldn't he delegate? I guess that this has to do with stubbornness or responsibility, honor, and so on. But I still think it wasn't necessary. This is why I'm telling you I didn't enjoy this plotline as much, because if I already don't think that the whole Orpheus plotline was needed, or he didn't need to end up in such a big mess, and he didn't need to turn around at the wrong moment and lose everything, you know, I thought it was, yeah, of course it's mythology and whatnot, but I didn't care for it. Maybe Dream could have given someone else the job to do, I don't know. Of course his character needed that plot point for developing the character. I also appreciated the mention to the fact that none of the Endless chose to exist, and that's true for us as well. And finally, today I watched part 2. It was dropped today. And so these are my thoughts as I saw everything without too much thinking. So maybe tomorrow I would have said something else. Right away, at the beginning of episode 7, I was intrigued by the title, Time and Night. 30 minutes in, there's this dialogue between Dream and Nuala, and he says,
There are authorities beyond the endless. Before the beginning there was the night, and the night was without boundaries and without end. In the beginning was time.
Since I'm not familiar with the family tree of the Endless, I wasn't expecting Time to be the father of the Endless, but I loved who they chose to play the character. I'm even thinking about making a whole video about actors I wish we would see more often, and Rufus Sewell is one of those. I love when I see him. And the entire dialogue between Time and Dream was top-notch. I laughed out loud when Time said,
Children are an inconvenient consequence of love.
I must say that during this confrontation, I was on Time's side because then Time says,
But I do not love you, Dream.
And then goes,
Do you love me?
And Dream replies,
A child cannot help but love his father, no matter who he is or what he does or doesn't do.
And I thoroughly disagree with Dream. I will not get into the reasons why, but I think he's wrong. I suppose some people might have thought that maybe by meeting the authorities, Dream would get something out of them, that this would actually be the last chance for him to change his fate. And yet, there was so much development in these dialogues, yet nothing changed in terms of the plot, which I found quite interesting. Because at this point we also meet Night, the mother, and at some point I wondered, why is everyone calling Dream selfish whenever he says he has duties and he's worried about his realm? I mean, he's right, in my opinion. But whenever we hear someone criticizing him for being selfish, it goes along with his duties, his responsibilities. I mean, what's wrong with that? As you can tell, I appreciated the dialogues in this episode because we hear the Dreams and the librarian talking while Dream is away, and Gilbert says,
Well, that is one nice thing about his long, penetrating silences. You can read into them whatever you want.
The dialogue in Lucien's quarters was heartbreaking.
There are parents who actually love their children, do anything for them.
Not mine,
No, but you did. For your son.
as you have done.
But also, the room itself, that's like a life goal. That was stunning. I would watch a bonus episode shot in her quarters only. In episode 8, we see the fairies again, and I thought it was funny how they showed this petty and frivolous side of the fairies, which I don't think is as represented in cinema and TV as it might be instead in books. I wasn't sure how they would tie everything together to wrap the series up, but I loved how they did it with despair, because at this point Dream is grieving and ends up in Despair's realm, where Despair can see Lyta, who is looking for her son, Daniel Hall, which is now more important than ever. I think they played it well with the short time they had to develop the entire story. And I also loved the moment in which we see Lucien, who did some research, and we do love to see some good old research. In episode 9, I thought that the Loki Park plot was a little predictable, and then there's this interesting dialogue between Dream and Delirium, in which he says,
I have responsibilities.
and she replies,
You use that word too much. Do you ever think about what it means in your head?
and I absolutely loved Dream's response.
I use it to refer to that area of existence over which I have a modicum of influence and control, namely the realm and action of dreaming.
But I also loved how Delirium defines herself and her family as...
Our existence deforms the universe.
By the way, even though I wasn't super convinced by Delirium in general. I thought she was too close to what happens in my head all the time. So that's why probably I was bothered by her a little, because that's too close to reality. When Dream brought back the Corinthian, so the second version of the Corinthian, it was a nice way to continue with that plot, but I didn't think it was necessary for him to be flirting with Joanna. In episode 10, Dream has changed and Death noticed it, just like others before her. And as I said, even his facial expressions helped us, the viewers, perceive his change. But this was also in the first lines of season 2, in which there's this voiceover of Dream saying that
Every dream, like every dreamer, is unique. Yet the one thing all dreams have in common is change.
And then we got to the part I wish we never had to see, because up until this point, I was just hoping for Dream to find a way out of that situation, because I thought it wasn't fair, and even though he killed his son based on what his son wanted, it was a direct request. He knew what he was doing, and that spilling his family's blood would basically kill him as well. Despite all of that and all the struggles in this season, I was still hoping, right, that he would survive, until he turned to Death and said,
I'm tired, my sister. I'm very tired.
And this, I felt it in my bones. Because for the first time I thought, he deserves to rest. I set aside my desire for him to stay alive, because I felt him at the very end, because I'm tired too, in the exact same way. Episode 11, A Tale of Graceful Ends, was excruciating. Yet, I deeply appreciate a show or a movie that is able to give us an ending, even when it's scary, or it can be more difficult to face, or it may be boring for some people because it's not necessary to the plot anymore. And yet, I think we needed a proper farewell. I've attended more than one funeral in my dreams. I saw people die, and I often woke up calling my brother, my mother, someone, and saying, "Are you okay? Is everyone fine?" Because I dreamt of one of them or some other relative or friend passing away in incredible ways, in dreams that looked way too real. And so I thought it wasn't too far from a possible dream that one of us could have, to attend the funeral of such an important person. Back to the final episode of this show, I thought poor Daniel was lost because he was just a baby, and then all of a sudden he has a whole kingdom to take care of. So even though I will grieve Dream, I still felt sorry for this poor guy. Desire, regretting, or at least not savoring what he thought would be a victory, was so good to see. After all, when you have a hero and his enemy who've been fighting for so long, and one of them perishes, the other feels as if they had no reason to keep going. There's no motivation left. So I appreciated the fact that they acknowledged this. In a way, they allowed desire to change as well. As I said, none of the Endless chose their functions or realms. See Destruction, who gave up, while Dream accepted his fate without abandoning his kingdom. He did it for his kingdom, meaning that you can really have opposite reactions to this. Nobody really forced Dream to keep going this way, and nobody forced Destruction to leave his realm. Destruction talks to Daniel and says that he was never invited to this palace, Dream's palace. You left for hundreds of years? Don't play the victim now. I loved Despair during the funeral, who says,
He was a creature of hope, for dreams are hopes and echoes of hopes.
And this was a nice reference to the fight with Lucifer, which Dream won by becoming Hope. I don't know if you stayed till the very end of the season. There was one final scene with the kindly ones, the Furies, and then I saw a final Sandman story on July 31st, which I could have known, but since I avoided all spoilers, I blocked the word Sandman everywhere for the past couple of days, and I didn't actively search anything related to this before the drop of the final part of the season. I missed this information, so I'm really happy about it. Even though I was expecting the final episode to be the bonus episode as they did in season 1, so I was really pleased that we got a funeral farewell episode. And I don't know what to expect from the bonus one, but for now this is all I have, and safe to say I am bitter knowing that the Sandman is over, knowing that this was a spectacular TV show. This was worth the time, the effort, the money. It deserved so much more. It's amazing. And as some other people on Threads said lately, we are grieving. Some should write a eulogy for this show because it's so good. So good. I couldn't stop thinking about it. As soon as I dropped the first part of season 2, I wanted to rewatch it right away. It was incredible. Mainly because I was invested in the story and the main character was way more than I expected. Way more than I could possibly imagine because I didn't know the character of Dream. And I wish we could explore the dreaming, so the kingdom itself, way more. And I guess that originally they had planned some more exploration of the kingdom. I will find out if I read the sources, but if you know about any movie or TV show that I haven't mentioned already in my Dreams recommendations video, please write them down below because I really need it. It's going to be difficult. What are your thoughts on both seasons or simply season 2? Did you read the original material? What did you think about the adaptation? Did you love Tom Sturridge and his acting as much as I did? Let me know in the comments. And now that you watched this, check out the video on the screen. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss my upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.